All right, welcome to our study board session for September 24th. Because it's a study session, we don't have to, we will not have our flag ceremony. And so we will move into our report of the staff, and I think this is Darren for the policy waiver request.
All right, this one is fairly brief. Okay, just a short policy waiver that we would request of the board is for our educator evaluation, SP 923. We would ask that the board waive the requirement that all educators complete a self-evaluation of professional growth goals by September 30th annually to allow for an extended deadline of October 14th, and that's just due to the nature of the pandemic and the multiple demands upon our teachers' time. getting these goals done. We're just wanting to take a little stress off of their plate and give them a short 2-week reprieve. And so we'd ask for that consideration from the board.
Okay.
How long is that? 4 hours.
To do the goals, so there's a self-assessment, and it can, I guess it can be as quick as you want or as long as you want, because if you're very thoughtful and you're taking your time doing it, you could be into a couple hours into the process easily. Of course, you can always zip like it, but yeah, it does take some time to really be thoughtful about it and self-reflect, because they have 10 different standards with lots of indicators underneath those, and so then you come up with your goals.
Do they need longer or is it 2 weeks? Or do you need it? I guess
We kind of said it so it's after parent-teacher conferences. I mean, I think we felt good about that as a date. We don't want to prolong it too long again, because then we've got some evaluations that need to be started. But we appreciate that. I think that's great to ask, but, and I'm looking around the room, but I think we felt like the 14th, which is a Friday, was a good day.
And do these evaluations roll out to their supervisor and?
Yes,
or
and
review them?
so,
Okay.
so then the administrators need to review them and approve those.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and you wanted us to suspend the
Yes.
rules and approve this
Yes.
one today. So I will take a vote to suspend the rules, or a motion to suspend the rules.
I move to suspend the rules.
Okay, and a second? And any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, and I will take a motion to approve the COVID-19, what am I approving? Policy waiver request, sorry. I'll take a motion to approve the COVID-19 policy waiver request. All right, and a second? And any discussion? Okay, and all in favor? And any opposed? Okay, thank you, Darren. We are going to move into our equity presentation. We appreciate all those that are here. I'm sure that Superintendent Covington or Mr. Dean are going to introduce you to us, so we appreciate your time. We'll turn this over to you guys.
All right, I wrote down some notes here just to get started, and so I just kind of want to go off of this as we get into this equity presentation. First, I want to thank the board for the opportunity. I've enjoyed being part of this equity council. As you might remember, it started as a grassroots effort out of Parkside Elementary last year, and it's continuing to blossom and unfold in our district in positive ways. And we appreciate the board's commitment to equity for both our students and staff alike. As you know, we find ourselves in some interesting times. In the midst of our pandemic, we also have a lot of social unrest related to racism in our country. Unfortunately, that's brought with it some divisiveness. Fortunately, we've seen limited divisiveness in our schools, but of course, across our country, we've seen a lot of divisiveness. As you know, we previously sent out a district memo regarding guidance with political speech, and soon after that, an addendum was sent out with the hopes of providing some additional clarification. We've made a decision as an administrative team to retract that, just due to some concerns that were brought forth. And so we're grateful for this study session. We see it as an opportunity to really dialogue with the board about equity and about Black Lives Matter and how to move forward as a district in a unified manner. So I'm going to turn the time over to our Equity Council Chair. It is Kara Cerise from Parkside Elementary, and she has been working tirelessly over the last couple of weeks to put together meaningful information to share with the board, and she'll introduce those who will be part of the study session. So thank you.
A little short. Thank you for that introduction, Darren. My name is Kara Cerise, and I teach third grade at Parkside Elementary, and also organize the district's Equity Council. First of all, I want to thank all of you for inviting us to attend this study session. And I understand that you have so much on your plate, and no one has given any one of us a manual of how to do our job during a pandemic. So I really appreciate all your hard work and your commitment to our school community. And I also hope that this is the first of many meetings of collaboration between the board and the Equity Council. Darren has asked me to formally introduce the council and as well as speak on the topic of Black Lives Matter in school. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that as a white person, I will never understand the pain of racism. What I do understand is that I have a responsibility to educate myself about race as well as support and advocate for my students and colleagues of color. Today I'm going to be joined by a fellow council member, Dr. Vanessa Job. She's the assistant principal at Horizon Elementary. Her doctorate is in educational leadership and policy, and she's doing some amazing equity work over at her school. Also with us is Dr. Jackie Thompson. And Dr. Jackie is a recently retired educator from the Davis District, where she was the director of the Department of Educational Equity. Dr. Jackie has also worked as a race desegregation specialist at the Utah State Office of Education. She has received many awards and national recognitions and for her commitment to equity work, and we're lucky enough to have had her as one of our trainers as part of our back to school professional development on equity. So thank you for being here, Dr. Jackie. Also joining us right now is Dr. Faustina Mahan Reynolds, who's been in education for 21 years. Dr. Reynolds is an administrator in the Park City School District, and in addition to working full-time as an educator, she also works as an adjunct professor, and her PhD is in educational leadership and policy. So as you know, I teach at one of the most culturally diverse schools in our district. I've taught at Parkside for 4 years. 3 of those years have been in 3rd grade. And in my classrooms alone, I've taught students from Mexico, Venezuela, Belarus, Iraq, Puerto Rico, Liberia, Brazil, Nepal, Colombia, and Egypt, just in those 3 years. At least half of my students every year are Black, Brown, Indigenous, biracial, or multiracial. And as we know, diversity also includes many other aspects of human identity, in addition to race, ethnicity, and nationality. And my classroom and my school is diverse in every sense of the word. I teach students who have learning disabilities, students who are on the autism spectrum, students who have vision impairments. I teach students with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender family members and parents, as well as students who identify as gender non-binary or gender non-conforming themselves. I teach students from many different socioeconomic backgrounds and also from many religious faiths and traditions. But when I look at my school staff, the same diversity that we see in our student population is not reflected. And the same goes for the staff of the district office and the board. And I point that out because when I think about the lack of representation that we have in the district in terms of staffing, I ask myself, what can I do and what can we be doing as a district to ensure that our staff and students that are disproportionately impacted by marginalization recognized, supported, celebrated, and empowered. And not only that, but how can we all benefit from learning about inclusion and diversity? Because I understand that not every school in our district has the same demographics as Parkside, but all of our students are going to be working in an increasingly diverse and global society, and knowing how to respect and work with people that are different from ourselves is a huge life skill. So one of the ways that I thought I could address some of these things that I often think about is creating an equity council for the district. So, excuse me, just a little while. So last October, I started meeting with some of my coworkers at Parkside to talk about these topics of educational equity. And as we were speaking, we thought that it would be great to include other schools in the district and to figure out how to make this a district-wide priority. So we approached Darren back in February and asked if we could make the council district-wide. And he was extremely supportive of that idea. And especially as just one person in the office who's kind of in charge of human resources and such, it helps take a load off of Darren and share that. And so thank you, Darren, for your support with that. So we started meeting as a full district council last May before the release of school. So that was on Zoom, of course, and now we meet once a month also via Zoom. There are currently 30 educators involved in the council, which includes school administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, special instructors, school social workers, and psychologists. There are even some parents on the council, and then Darren as our district office representative. Every school in the district has a representative except for McMillan and Riverview. But we're hoping that people will join from those schools as well. That just is coincidence. So between the general council meetings that we hold once a month, there's also a leadership team of 8 educators. And that group of people just make sure that our efforts are organized and on track in between the general council meetings. So that's sort of the structure and function currently. Something that we recently did was created a collaborative mission statement, and you will find that in the resource folders that I gave you. I also shared a copy with Darren of all of these resources digitally with hyperlinks so that you can go directly to the source provided in the folder. So I'll let you read through that on your own just for the sake of time, but I do want to share the mission, which is to build a diverse, equitable, and inclusive district by providing all students, families, and employees with a community of care, respect, and belonging. Everything that we do as a council is with that mission in mind. And one of the topics that has been brought to our attention recently as a council is Black Lives Matter. So as we're talking about Black Lives Matter this afternoon, I want to make sure that there's an accurate narrative of what's happening in schools. And from the information that I've received from Darren, there's been a handful of complaints about Black Lives Matter signs up at some of the schools. And he discussed the memo that was sent out. So today we are hoping to provide some insight and some clarification about what the message of those 3 words is and their important place in schools, as well as offer resources for study to address some of the misconceptions and myths about the Black Lives Matter movement. And I wanted to be very clear that we want to work together with the board and the district office and be part of a proactive plan and solution when addressing this. So we've provided a lot of examples of what some other districts are doing or have done regarding the topic. And at the end, after the other presenters go, I'll be sharing a few requests and suggestions from the council to the board and the district office. So with that, thank you, and I will now turn the time over to Dr. Jackie.
Thank you, Ms. Kara Cerise, for your outstanding service. Good afternoon to School Board President, Ms. Kim Anderson, Vice President, Ms. Belinda Johnson, Board members, Superintendent, Ms. Jennifer Covington, and to Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Sash Bushnell, district staff, and community members. It is indeed an honor to be with you today. Thank you for what you do on a continuous basis for our students. I will be talking about the historical context of Black Lives Matter. If you allow me, I'll do a Reader's Digest version, very short. So, as we begin, Black Lives Matter is not new, and it is not political. It's a question of human and civil rights. African history is world history, and Black history is American history. My ancestors come from the continent of Africa. Slavery is but one chapter in the encyclopedia of African Americans' history. We come from great kings and queens, scientists, inventors, doctors, artists, educators. Our roots run deep. Violence against Blacks started over 400 years ago when we took the journey from Africa to America. When slave ships brought Black people to America to be enslaved and treated as property and considered as 3/5 of a human being, unfortunately and unacceptably, the violence has persisted ever since in numerous ways that we will be talking about. Today, we're not here to say anything about blame, shame, or guilt. It's our common humanity as we work together so that all lives will matter. So when we look at it, I want you to know that 2 million Africans died in that middle passage. Look at that graphic and you'll see that's how the slaves were packed together at the bottom of the slave ships, very seldom coming up for air or for food. Inhumane treatment. When we look at slavery, we look at over 400 years of oppression, enslaved Africans classified as property, family members separated, immoral and inhumane treatment. When I was looking this topic up yesterday on a few more items, I thought, did you ever hear about the largest slave sale in Georgia history? One of the largest sales of enslaved persons in U.S. history took place on March the 23rd, 1859, at 10 Road Race Course, a quarter mile south of where this was located. To satisfy his creditors, Pierce M. Butler sold 436 men, women, and children from his Butler Island and Hampton plantations. And this was near Darien, Georgia. The breakup of families and the loss of home became part of African American heritage, remembered as the weeping time. The event was reported extensively in the northern press, and reaction to the sale deepened the nation's growing sectional divide in the years immediately preceding the Civil War. There are parts of our history that we must teach so that they are never repeated again. The Civil Rights Movement. Now, I was born during this time of the Civil Rights Movement, the year 1955, when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus. You will remember that story. But when we look at this with the civil rights, I think you'll find it interesting to know that the struggle for African Americans and Black people in this country has been constant. Therefore, Black Lives Matter is a continuation of the legacy for fighting civil rights by people of color, particularly Black people. Today, you see people of all races, as we saw young children back in the 60s and 50s marching. They march again today of all races. So as we look at this, one of the names for this pursuit for justice now happens to be called Black Lives Matter. When I think about the 13th Amendment, wow, that's pretty powerful, because the 13th Amendment, ratified on December 6, 1865, abolished slavery in the United States. It says, and I quote, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereas the party should have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place of subject to their jurisdiction." If you watched the news yesterday, you would have seen that the Utah Constitutional Amendment C, the remove slavery as a punishment for crime in our Constitution in Utah, will be on the ballot November the 3rd. I hope you will vote. Let's get it out. is still in several states. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified on July 9, 1868, and it granted citizenship to persons born or naturalized in the United States, which included former enslaved Africans who were recently free. The 15th Amendment, isn't it something? We have to continue with these amendments. We're working to get it right. The Constitution is a living document. Granted African American men the right to vote, and this was before white women had the right to vote. February 3rd, 1870. Things were beginning to change. But you know, we take one step forward and two steps backwards, because here came the Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws were a collection of state and local statutes in the South that legalized racial segregation. I found out it was named after a black minstrel show character. These laws existed for 100 years from the post-civil rights war era, until 1968. And they were meant to marginalize African Americans by denying them the right to vote, hold jobs, get an education, or other opportunities. The roots of the Jim Crow law began as early as 1865, and it was immediately following the 13th Amendment. Let's now go over and look at Brown versus the Board of Education, 1954. Segregation of public schools was declared unconstitutional unanimously by the United States Supreme Court in the landmark case of Brown versus the Board of Education. The court ruled that separate was indeed not equal. In some states, it took many years to implement this decision. This leads us to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This act prohibited discrimination in public accommodations and federally funded programs. It also strengthened the enforcement of the Voting Rights Act and desegregation in schools. That takes us up to 1965 Voting Rights Act. And remember, although African American previously had the right to vote, we were prevented through poll tax. We were asked questions like, how many bubbles in a bar of soap? How many jelly beans in a jar? Denied human rights. So the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a landmark piece of federal legislation in the United States that prohibited discrimination in voting. It was signed into law by President Lyndon Baines Johnson during the height of the Civil Rights Movement in 1965. Congress had to amend this act 5 times to expand its protections. If you remember the march from Selma to Montgomery, led by Dr. Martin Luther King and Congressman John Lewis, they said, we got to get into some good trouble, necessary trouble, trouble that's going to benefit each and every one of us. Stand up, speak up, and do the right thing. As you look at this next slide with George Floyd and with the officers in Flint, Michigan, meeting, it says, we want to be with you. They laid down their weapons and they said, we're in this together. After seeing these images, Governor Gary Hurd, on June 3rd, 2020, called our commissions together in an emergency meeting, the Human Rights Commission and the Multicultural Education Commission. And I'm part of that Multicultural Education Commission. And a statement was put out. The letter will be in your packet, but I'll just read the first part of it. We are deeply saddened and heartbroken by the brutal and inhumane murder of Mr. George Floyd and the many lives taken before him. Their deaths have prompted the community to pause and reflect how racism and injustice affects everyone individually and collectively in our daily lives, but also to consider how it is uniquely felt by communities of color. He says the time to usher in change and healing is now, the time to learn from history that tells a tale of a divided nation can guide us to do better and to work fiercely to achieve educational equity and inclusion in our policies and practices. So as we look at the next slide, because Black lives matter and all lives matter, what can we do? I'm glad you asked. Black Lives Matter communicates a powerful message to educators and students that say, I recognize the historical struggle to value and honor the humanity and dignity of Black people continues into the present day. I support challenging racism and understand that I have a role in dismantling the systems that perpetuate it. So finally, we must create welcoming and affirming and inclusive classrooms, schools, and I might add community and a nation. That will include Black Lives Matter signs in the buildings and in the classrooms so that when students walk in, they know that my life is important, I am in a safe zone, and I am welcome here. Multicultural curriculum that we learn about all of our history and background that we all have contributed. Multicultural presentations for the students. Students want to know. They say, why don't we know these things? Thank you for the opportunity for continual professional development on diversity and inclusion, that it continues for district staff and for school staff. And then, as you heard Ms. Kara so eloquently put, the hiring of diverse educators and staff. We look at windows and mirrors. When students see reflections of themselves, that's the mirror. All teachers need to be prepared to teach all students. We have more in common than we have differences. It's our commonality that brings us closer together, and our diversity that enriches us. Thank you again for this opportunity, and thank you for your commitment to all children.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Jackie. I'm smiling. I don't know if you can tell, but
Smile with your eyes.
yeah. Thank you for allowing us to present. I'm Dr. Vanessa Joe, and this is Dr. Christina Reynolds. So I'll kind of show you guys the Horizon Equity book boxes were already posted on the Murray School District website, but I just like to go through and kind of explain some of the anti-racist education that's already going on in our district and the benefits that we've seen from that. So I'll go through the book boxes, some student responses, parent responses, and then high school student responses as well. So in Horizon Elementary, we started off with full faculty meetings and professional developments. And the reason that we do the professional developments for teachers is we've embedded our second steps curriculum in with equity practices. So for instance, in August, we covered safety, respect, and race. So we went over the definition of race and gave some teacher training about that. And then September was being assertive in language. And then coming up in October, we have sexuality, gender, and understanding differences. And the reason that we're embedding all these equity practices together is they all intersect and they create kind of one equity practice altogether. So we're just doing focuses and background building for teachers with this. Okay, so we worked with the King's English bookstore and we got the following book boxes, which is really exciting. So each teacher has 4 books for special education, kinder, and then all the way to 6th grade. And we also created a justice team, which includes 13 participants at Horizon Elementary. And together, we have worked with the following document. In this document, if you hover over a book, it links to a lesson. So that's nice, and it goes the same way. So special education, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and there. And so I'm going to show you an example of what one of those lessons look like. And so this is for Black is a Rainbow Color, and this is for one of the kindergarten books. So there's an opportunity for students that are on hybrid or online to also look at the story. And then there's some playlists of songs that were recommended in the children's books as well. Those have been really fun for kids. And then this is a quote from the book.
So it says Black is history, Black is family, Black is memory, Black is community, Black is the love that lives inside of me, my color is Black. And then restoratively, that's where we would ask the children to identify what's your color, and then understand their perceptions of themselves, and then look at differences, and then also understand the commonality with the differences. And then, yeah, Tina, you can tell us some of your experiences.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I was here back in July, and be superintendent, and I really enjoyed your district. I actually live in your district. I live in my district, so. So what I wanted to share when I was invited to come in to speak, I thought to myself, wow, right? What are we really saying? We're thinking about Black Lives Matter. And for some people in the room here, you would automatically say, all lives matter. Why don't all lives matter? Why are we saying Black Lives Matter? And I think that Dr. Thompson gave a history of why we say Black Lives Matter, because really with the history of our country, they haven't mattered, right? We just had Breonna Taylor's judgment come down now, and it's really quite shocking that you'd be sleeping while Black and have this happen. And so it's very emotional when it comes to Black people saying that their lives matter, right? Because all lives should matter, right? And I think of the movie A Time to Kill, when at the end of the story, there's a series of events that led up to a little girl being violated, and at the end, Matthew McConaughey, as the lawyer, said, now close your eyes and picture that little girl and the trauma that she sustained. And now think of her as a little white girl. And you could see how that touched the jury and how it really touched everyone. And unless you really honestly have a personal connection to Black Lives Matter, you would probably think, well, why? Why is this? I don't understand, right? So it's really about understanding. I want to share a quick story that happened in my district at my school. A few years ago, I had a couple of students, and they were in French class, and their teacher was a French teacher who was, she hailed from Gabon and on the continent of Africa, and she spoke fluent French, fluent English. Well, she gave the kids journals. There were 3 boys. She had given their journals to me. And she said, I'm really terrified. You need to look through these journals. And I said, oh, Madam so-and-so. I said, I don't understand French, but I'll do my best. And so she goes, no, it's all in English, what you need to look at. So she showed me the pages. And I said, okay, let me look through the pages. So I looked through the pages, and the 3 French students, they had written the N-word, like throughout parts of the journal. Then in history, they were learning about civil rights, they were learning about lynching, so they, of course, were just drawing trees with little nooses. And so I looked at these journals and I said, oh my, oh my. So I had to bring the boys in, 3 13-year-old boys who were white. I'm a Black administrator, I'm the only Black administrator in Park City. I'm sure you could guess that. And so how was I to handle this? You know, being a woman of color and seeing this N-word and knowing what the N-word means to me and to my family. My grandfather had a price on his head from the Klan, and he left the South up to New York, and that's where he brought his family and where he raised his family, because there was an interaction with him and a Klansman in the South, and his dad, who was Cherokee Indian, and my grandfather was half Black, half Native American, half Indigenous, Cherokee, Southeastern Cherokee man. And the man said something derogatory to my great-grandfather, so my grandfather stepped in, and that's when he had to flee. So having all this history in my mind, I said to myself, okay, first and foremost right here, I'm an administrator in this school, right? I'm always gonna be a Black woman, right? There's no denying that. But I'm an administrator in this school. How am I going to handle this? And so I brought the boys down. I told the teacher to go upstairs, I would handle it. and I would keep in touch with her once I did the full investigation. So I would call the boys down. I would have them go through their journals and talk to me about what they wrote. And so I first addressed the N-word, and I said, what does that mean? And they're like, well, we know it's kind of like a derogatory word, we don't totally know. So I walked them through the history of the word. And as I walked them through the history, their body language changed, and they became really nervous, they started to cry. And I said to them, you know, how does this make you feel? Because this particular teacher, do you see how because she was scared for her life. I mean, she thought these boys really were gonna do something to her and cause her bodily harm. And, you know, I shared with them, I said, do you see how the teacher could feel unsafe? And they said, we had no idea. They said, we were just basically kind of, you know, we've listened to some things on social media. We thought it was okay to write that word and write it how we wrote it. And in terms of the trees, we just did that because we're learning about that, and we're learning about lynching, and we were just doodling because French class is really boring. And I was like, okay, as boring as it might be, boys, you have to understand how Madam so-and-so felt. And so they said, okay, well, what can we do? Because he didn't mean that. And I said, well, I didn't think you meant it, and I'm so happy that you're telling me you didn't mean it, but we have to do something restorative now. We have to figure out how Madam so-and-so can hear what you're saying. So we're gonna meet with her. How do you all feel about meeting? And they said, well, are you gonna be there? And I said, I'm gonna be there. But you need to be honest and let her know, you know, what your intentions were, how you felt, and how this all came about. So they were fine with it. I called their parents, and from the phone conversation, the parents and I had never met before of these three individuals, these two boys. And so I met the parents at our front office, and they were like, no, we have a meeting with Miss Reynolds. And I said, yeah, you have a meeting with me. And they said, no, our boys got into a little bit of mischief, and so we need to meet with Miss Reynolds. And I said, that's me. And so they were like, no. And so the secretary interjected and said, yes. This is who you want. This is who you spoke to. And so one of the moms began to cry. Another mom, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't know if I can have this meeting with you. And I said, yeah, you can have a meeting with me. I'm not gonna invite you. Come on back, let's have a meeting. So I met individually with these parents, but the point of the story is this. As a woman who has gone through that, a woman of color, Black woman, those were my students, and I saw them as such. For me to have endured the experiences that I have endured, and to treat those boys any differently would not have been right by me as a professional woman, right? Working as an administrator. I have to do a full investigation, and I can't let my bias get in the way. So my point is this: as we move forward and we grow as a country, as we grow as districts in the state of Utah, as we grow as districts across this nation, we have to seek to understand, and we have to seek to be understood. And so I just ask you that as you move forward in your processes, please, I know that some things are unknown and some things are fearful, and we are, you know, we're scared. And I didn't know when I was dealing with this. I wanted to make sure that I did right by the teacher, and I wanted to make sure I did right by the kids, and the kids received the consequences they were supposed to receive as well, right? While still dealing with the families and not having them feel guilty, but understand that, you know, we have to really watch what our children are looking at. We have to be able to explain. If I just went at the students with a safe school policy and said, you know what, you were threatening a teacher, that's it, you're out. That's not the way that's not the way I roll. That's not the way I handle things. So I had to be educated. And so I just ask, as we move through this journey together, that we may all be educated and really make decisions that are just in the best interest of the children. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. And then I would like to show you two other examples from the student book boxes. So this was after a 4th grade student read The Undefeated, and you have a copy of this in your folders as well. But this was the student's response after being able to read the book. and a fourth grade student, and she said, the book was about how we all want to be loved and how Black people don't deserve this. We are all beautiful and they have been through tough times. Even if you don't believe in the Black Lives Matter protest, they're still human and they still want to be loved like we do. And we won't stop fighting until America is not racist. So I thought that was a really great opportunity for student learning through the book boxes. And then here's a couple other student responses. I can share the slides with you after. And then just to back up to what Dr. Reynolds was saying about parent communication, because I think it's really important at our school. We want parents to be aware of the anti-racist education that their children have the opportunity to receive. So we sent a parent square out for it. In general, we get 4 to 9 likes. We got 30 likes on the book boxes. So that was awesome. And we generally get 0 to 1 comments, and we got 18 comments. And so that was really cool to see that. And I think also understanding that there are, every complaint or concern is valid, and treating those with respect as administrators and as teachers is really helpful for us too. And I think that really defining the purpose of the book boxes and the purpose of Black Lives Matter support systems and the purpose of LGBTQ support and all of those combined, but really taking and valuing everyone's perspective and then outputting clear messaging is really important for us at Horizon, and I think important for the district as well. So I'll just read a response that we had to a parent that had more questions. She said, hold up, what is this? And I said, the purpose of the book boxes is to appreciate our differences in order to identify empathy of experiences of others and find community with these differences. Anti-racist education does not leave out white students. The great thing about our restorative lessons with book boxes is that children have time to reflect on their own cultures and learn about others. And so we're celebrating backgrounds with access of the new books. So that was kind of how we dealt with that one. And then let's see, Kara, is it time for you to go for this or do we go? Okay. So I'm gonna have Kara do the action steps, but this was from Latinos in Action. And they went forward and had some ideas for the board as well. So these are high school students, and I'll share those with you so you can read over them afterwards.
So we'll just finish up because I know that we're running out of time. So the only thing I'm going to say is that there are just a few lists of requests at the back, and so we can address that later. And those requests can be addressed with the district office and the board as well. So we just want to keep collaboration open. And yeah, so I'll just end it with that so that we can move on with the rest of the meeting. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the others who spoke and shared their expertise. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kara, and thank you for all of you bringing here and presenting to us and giving us more information. Any questions, concerns? All right, thank you.
Well, if you'll share those slides, Vanessa, I will get them all.
Yeah, that would be great.
She'll share it with me.
I also need to include the letter from Governor Kirkland.
Okay, I was gonna ask about that.
And I'm not sure who put this together, who did, but I appreciate it. This is great information, and it will be very useful. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to prepare.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to move on to our next topic, and that's the evaluation of reopening plans. And this looks like, this is under your superintendent.
Well, it's all a little bit under me, so. Let me share this. So, we're gonna start. We are gonna start by addressing one of the things in our plan is ventilation systems. And I would ask if David Roberts would come up and share some information that he has found from other districts. As you're aware, we're running our systems 24 hours, but he wanted to talk to the board, maybe having some consideration in changing that. So this will be the first one. I'll also ask if our district people can come forward so that we can have some of these conversations kind of in a U form here.
Back row goes, guys.
Thank you, board members, and thank you, Superintendent. Let me just talk about ventilation. So our HVAC systems currently are running 24/7. Thank you, board members. We just talked about that. So our It's just an echo. I don't know if I want to hear myself echo. Yeah, once is enough, I promise. Okay, first of all, I'd like to let you guys know that in talking to an outside consultant as well as our maintenance supervisor, that our buildings only take roughly about an hour to refresh, which means that the air that's in the building, in order to replace all that air in the building with fresh air from the outside, only takes about an hour. As the outside air gets colder, it's going to be harder and harder to get our buildings at a temperature that's comfortable for our teachers by the time they come in, if we're running those buildings constantly 24/7, because the outside air eventually is going to be quite a bit colder than the inside air. And we've already had that situation with a couple schools when it got really cold around Labor Day. Okay? There's a lot less stress on all the mechanics of our HVAC systems. The mechanical components that take a lot of stress involved in running those 24/7 and having no rest. Because they're running 24/7 and because we have updated our filters on the system, the airflow is being more restricted. The capacity is being reduced because there's less air being able to be pushed through the filters at the same amount of airflow that is being produced by the fans. Of course, we know that the longer we run, the more energy consumption there's going to be. I've called 5 other school districts, and no other school districts that I've called are running their systems 24/7. So my recommendation is that we turn on the ventilation system 2 hours in the morning before occupation and leave them on until our sweepers go home in the evening, which at the elementary level will be somewhere between 6 to 8 p.m., which will be at least 2 hours after the teachers are done. And then we completely shut them off at the elementary. On Saturdays and Sundays, they will still be on at secondary schools on Saturdays, but shut off on Sundays. That would be my recommendation. Any questions? Yeah.
So that's general schools that cycle air, but are there certain classrooms that have less ventilation capability that really might be more of an issue?
So in talking to our maintenance supervisor, every classroom has what they call a ventilator in the rooms, and those can still be operated and still be able to continue to produce outside air into those classrooms on an individual basis. And we can control those electronically.
In every building?
Yes.
Well, there you go. I think that's great. It's like most modern. Well, we don't have the most modern buildings, so.
Yeah.
It's the fans through the swamp crews and those kind of things that are not, we don't have electronic control.
Yeah.
Do we need to vote on that, or
Yeah,
that's just a
I think
discussion?
we would just need to make a vote. I think that would be great if we're gonna change it, because we have a plan that's been approved by the board. And so I think a vote would be, then we can update it as of,
Is this the only thing that we're really voting on?
this is the only thing we'll be voting on.
Okay, so we'll take a vote for
As far as
that.
changing our plan,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, I'll take a motion to approve the ventilation addendum changes, to our, school plan. And a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion, questions?
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
and all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? All right.
So I'm up next, but because this needs to be really a discussion with the entire district team, I'm gonna bring the mic over here. And one of the things we'd like to talk about with the board, as you're aware, we've talked about concerns that have been shared with us by teachers. And in our last board meeting, you asked us to gather some data, get some information on kind of things that were happening. And so we did that. And so as you're aware, in our return plan, we offer 3 different options. We offer an in-person classroom learning, a hybrid learning, and online learning. In our elementary schools, our elementary teachers are responsible for the in-person as well as the hybrid. And then we have a separate set of teachers that are working beyond their contract for the online. In our secondaries, they are doing all 3 modalities. And so we've had concerns brought to us, and we very much appreciate our Murray Education Association, who has been working with us. We've asked for time. We really feel like we need to give our plan time prior to making some changes. We are now at the point where we feel like we have some data. We've received several emails from teachers and from principals regarding the fact that there's a lot of teacher burnout currently. And what we're doing is not necessarily sustainable. There's concern from teachers that they're not able to have the time to do the good work that they'd like to be able to do to prepare lessons and really give the time needed to students. And so with that, we have sat together as a district leadership team and thought about some potential solutions for board consideration. And what I'd like to do is have us kind of talk through these and the viability. We've got challenges and benefits, and this can be open for anybody here. And then what I'd like to propose is, I think it's important that we make a decision on if we're going to do something different, probably next week, so in order to give our families and our teachers some preparation time that might be needed. We, believe it or not, the end of the quarter is only 3 weeks away. So, right, it's crazy. And so while I think that we need to talk about this tonight, talk through it. I've talked to President Anderson about perhaps scheduling a board meeting next week if we feel that's appropriate to talk through these and make recommendations and then really solidify which one we're going to do. It does need to be voted on in an open board meeting. One of the things, kind of the last statement I want to make, and then we'll walk through these, is we definitely believe that we need to do our best as a district to make sure that our students get the best education possible, while at the same time supporting our teachers and avoiding teacher burnout. And as you know, our surrounding districts, Canyons, Jordan, and Granite, have done some shifting. Salt Lake School District is still fully online. And so we've kind of taken a lot of different approaches here. So, and one of them, or some of them have changed most recently as of 4 o'clock, just as we looked at things. So I'm just going to kind of talk through this, and then I'll just kind of give the highlights of each one, and then please, the district team add in. So the first solution that we have for consideration is to provide additional prep time at the end of each day. And as we looked at that, busing has to be a consideration. So this is where we've had some changes. These are different times than if you looked at it this prior to 4 o'clock, because like it or not, we have to bus our students, and we have finite resources in that area. And our bus drivers deliver both our secondary and our elementary students. So with this one, it changes it to dismissing the junior high at 1 o'clock every day. The elementaries are dismissed at 1:30 every day, and the high school stays at 2 o'clock. And the reason for that is there's a large disproportionate amount of time between elementary and secondary prep time. And within the secondary, a lot of disproportion between junior high and high school. And that's just the nature of what it is, because our high schools have gone to an 8-period day, a block schedule. Currently, we feel like our high school is in a pretty good spot. So this would add time to our junior high and elementary, which makes prep time more equitable. It provides daily prep time. We can continue all 3 modalities of learning. It can address the concern expressed by teachers. And one of the things that we've talked about is the possibility for interventions for our elementary students to run from 1:30 to 2:45. And we have worked with transportation where we have an activity bus that would come and pick those kids up. And I'm going to have Missy kind of speak a little bit more to that, but this would give us some opportunity to have some targeted interventions with those students who really need it, and we would provide transportation. Challenges, of course, loss of face-to-face instruction time. Parents would need to find childcare for the afternoons. We have teachers in our own district who have their own children in their classroom after school, and so this would increase the time that might be there, and we would need to address that. We would need additional busing with our secondary students not out at the same time, meaning we have to run a junior high bus run and a high school bus run. But that's doable. We can do that. And then additional busing is needed for the interventions. again, we can face both of those two last challenges. So I'm just gonna kind of open it up to any of my team to discuss this possible potential solution, and then,
We're gonna pass the mic.
yeah, I'm good, I'm fine. Okay, so a couple of benefits that this would pose is that gives just shy of 2 hours of additional prep time for my elementary teachers that so desperately need that in order to prep the 2 modalities that they need, and my online teachers, those 24 that are doing that extra additional work, they need that extra time as well. This also provides some, I lost my train of thought on that one. Couple of challenges, however, that are listed there, but also in a real intervention model, you do have certified teachers that are providing that intervention. In this case, we're having paraprofessionals offering that, thank you, Scott, offering that intervention, which isn't necessarily the scientifically based research that we have. However, we do have a couple of intervention models. We may not get paraprofessionals wanting to just do those interventions in the afternoon. And we may need to look at adjusting specials and not offering specials or limiting the amount of specials, because teachers are getting 2 hours a day of preparation time, and specials used to be that offering during the week. So, because we want to maximize our core academic contents in the elementary grades. So those are some of the things that, as I've been chewing on this, that I've been thinking about. Any questions off the top of your head on those, and any comments from district admin? What percentage of students need intervention? So, and that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Well, the COVID slide is real. I don't want to speak for schools that are collecting their data, but as they've been sending it to me, and I've done rough checks, we have about 65% to 80% of our students that are going to be needing interventions. I think that we could rapidly get kids out of interventions, because I think it's, we're out of practice, we've been out of school for a long time, but they were testing pretty low from Dibbles and then from our 95% group. So that's like having school, right, for the afternoon. But the hope is that with really focused instruction from 8:30 to 1:30 and really differentiated good tier 1, we can close some of those gaps, and then that targeted tier 2 time, that we could close those gaps even more rapidly. What would force kids to stay for that afternoon intervention? Dot, right? Lots of candy. I've already started. So you said some of them would be staying because they don't have any place else to go, whether they need intervention or not. Well, with statistics like 65 to 80%, right?
And it might be they are divided in.
Mm-hmm.
So, we need this group, we need this group. It's like Lucy said, we could probably take half of those, and with some really good interventions, we can probably move them and catch them up. Others, it might need to be every single day. So I don't know, to let students select. I kind of think it would be more, teachers are contacting and saying, we need your students to stay. Here's what we're doing. We're just continuing school with them.
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's say it's 3rd grade and you have 3 3rd grade teachers. So for the intervention, would you possibly have all 3 of them doing intervention?
No, and that was one of the challenges that I said, is that the whole purpose of this potential solution is to provide teachers with prep time from 1:30 to 3:30. In an evidence-based practice, we want our teachers providing the intervention. In this case, we would be asking our paraprofessionals offering that intervention from 1:30 to 2:45. So it wouldn't be our teachers providing that intervention. It would be our paraprofessionals.
As our paraprofessionals,
Yeah.
they're still have to refer to the teacher a lot.
They're pretty highly trained in 95% group, for sure. And there would still be some really good tier 1 instruction that's happening that's
the addendum, you know, the pre-95% group stuff that makes the 95% group tier 2 piece work. And so that isn't gonna go away. But yeah, we have great parents, they're very well trained. We are crossing our fingers and toes. I want all of you guys to do that too, that they're willing to work in the afternoon if this is one of the potential solutions that we land on. With the junior high.
I just, and I apologize, I'm like in 3 places at once tonight with providing Zoom online translation services as well. I just know that our junior high teachers have been tasked with teaching online, hybrid, and in person, and they have the 45-minute prep, and very grateful for the time that we gave them to sustain that with the half hour, but they're still dying on the vine. And what they're finding is they really need some sustained time for their online and hybrid students. And the reason for that is that even though some of them are rock stars with their direct instruction that they're uploading, there's still an awful lot of magic juju that happens in the classroom when you teach and then you assign something and students start to work. Teachers typically were able to get around and requalify, reteach, whatever that needed to be. And oftentimes in the classroom, a teacher was able to gather kids together. So they also were able to gauge, hey, I can go back to the whole class and teach it again. And we've lost all of that with the hybrid and online because they're not participating during that time. And so they're reaching out individually. They're reaching out oftentimes later in the afternoon when a parent hasn't been able to help them. And they're finding that there's a necessary sustaining of that instruction to keep those kids going. And it is interesting. I would advocate that many of our junior high teachers, especially at Riverview, because of the size of the school, they're teaching what we call productivity, and they are getting paid for that. But what it means is they're teaching all day without a prep. And then they are trying to keep pace with getting things uploaded by that 4:30 time so that families for hybrid and for online are not feeling like they're getting further and further behind. So when we started to really try to pick at why were we hearing so much from our junior high teachers and not from our high school teachers, it really came down to the AV schedule, and it came down to the amount of students that they're serving and that ability to help the online and hybrid students.
So, we're all done. I mean, in honesty, and you guys are part of the solution. You get the money. Right. Just brutally honest. If the next thing we're gonna hear is that 4 hours. I mean, is there always, because the list is so big, does it not matter how much time you give, that it will not be enough? I was looking at more.
And I, from my perspective, because we explored things with the junior high principals about, could we change your schedule to a block schedule? Could we do that? We looked at a lot of different options, and really it came back to that ability to provide the support and the level of trust and camaraderie between the parents and the students. And I think that what I've heard from the majority of our teachers and our principals is they were asking for any consideration. Like when they put this forward, they were like, can you give us 30? Can you give us 40? Can you give us Friday? Can you give us, can you give us more sprinkling of a full day off? And they were kind of grasping to just say, this is what we're doing and it's killing us. And so I do believe that our teachers will be grateful for anything that we put forward. And then came the conversation of how do we do this with buses? And that becomes complicated. The idea that the elementary is running with saying, we can keep your students here who need those additional interventions, I think is brilliant. I think that there's opportunities to make that work. The other part too is that I do know Alpine School District has stayed with their half-day schedule and intend to stay with that half-day schedule. Not that we need to give a concession for another district doing it, but I think what it does is it honors both sides. It honors our teachers for the lift that they're being asked to do. And I think that Missy probably would echo the same thing with the fact that she does have online teachers, but that hybrid portion is also a place that they're really shouldering. And you will find that our elementary and our junior high teachers, they're not doing okay when we say let things go, because they're saying, you're telling me let students go. And so I think that those conversations, if we're going to sustain those relationships within all three arenas, we've got to be able to give them time to do that.
So what does that look like out of junior high? How many minutes are in each class right now? On our short day? 50? 50. So what does that put us at?
That would be the classroom, 30.
Yeah, because they would go back to the first 2 weeks and they were at 30 minutes.
Can you teach math, English, and science in 30 minutes?
Oh, don't look at me, I'm elementary.
I mean, you work in the junior high, so you do have all three, that's pretty well answered.
Yeah, I can tell you what will happen, and I'll let Robin sound off on this, and this is me talking as a parent of super high kids, not even kids that struggle. Yep, they'll have homework, a lot of it, and they did those first 2 weeks, and because the lessons are structured in a 50-minute period, so what happens is, watch the lesson video, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because the lesson videos that like Sheldon McGowan and all of those teachers are putting out are solid. They're good lessons, but there's only a 30-minute time frame, right? So they're going to be watching this video, hear some face-to-face instruction, go home and finish off the lesson plan, and that's going to be times 7.
And I have that thing, I have a student in that, and the first 2 weeks, it was like, they were pulling their brothers and saying, teach me how to do this, because I didn't learn it in school.
Yeah.
Luckily, they have that support, because I'm clueless and their brothers are okay. But there's a lot of kids that don't have that support.
Yeah.
So my biggest concern is the loss of instruction time. And you're saying the COVID slide is real. I've seen it in my own kids.
Yeah.
And mine are high functioning. So as a board, we have to balance. I have talked to a lot of teachers, this issue is real. I did my homework, I went out and visited with a lot. So where's the balance?
Right, and I dare say, and I know Superintendent and I have talked quite a bit, and we went out and got, I didn't have conversations, I get to have digital conversations. And so the data that we gathered, and the kind of the conundrum that we're in is that the hybrid is really the straw that breaks the camel's back. And while we really want to be attentive to our parents and wanting to have those choices, that's the straw that's really kind of really breaking our teachers in elementary. And I don't know if that's the case in secondary, we can ask. That's a tricky, that's a sticky widget, right? If that didn't exist, I think we wouldn't even need to discuss potential solution. I think the schedule that we're on now, yep, I don't even think we need to talk about any of these crazy alternatives at all. Would we have to adjust maybe our online numbers up or down? Probably. But if we just did online or in person, I think that would streamline everything. Hybrid has really caused some major gray area. And we have some parents, we have 53% of parents, of the teachers that answered our survey. I need to be very clear in that. Those percentages that are on that board, of the teachers that answered the survey, 46% of families are not doing any work. And so the COVID slide is even more real. And 53% are doing what they're supposed to do. So we don't want to punish 53%. We're losing 47% of students, and that's unacceptable too.
They're not being on the hybrid side? Yeah.
Well, it's a variation. Some are not 1 day behind, some are 2 days behind. A couple things, the hybrid is a concern for elementary. It's a concern the other way for the secondary to get rid of it, because the secondary really feel like one of the reasons we have lower COVID numbers is because we have that opportunity to do that. And I will have to say on the other side, again, if we get rid of the hybrid, we have given our teachers, not that it's a bad thing, but our elementary teachers are now doing one modality. They're just doing in person because we have online teachers, and they've been given that extra 30 minutes. So keep that, again, I'm not saying, I just want you to be informed. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It's just like they would normally do. So they have their kids back in class.
Right, but you gotta know that what you're hearing from parents is on hybrid, they were so excited, and are still excited about having that option. So that's.
Yeah, so let's go through the rest of these because, but we want you to be as informed. I mean, we're trying to give you as much information.
I do think it's really important, and I did spend time at the high school this morning. We're absolutely committed to giving parents choice, and we're committed to the students doing what they need to do. Scott Wahangi told me this morning the high school would have been closed by now had we not had the hybrid option and the online option. And as we get better at doing our jobs as teachers, as we get better at our Canvas courses, as we get better at making sure that students and parents can trust us, we're having more and more of our families exercise the option of hybrid. And what we're seeing is that Thursday, Friday, and Monday, we're pretty lean. We've got classrooms that went from 40 to 14. And that is only because some of our families are really trusting us. And that, again, when we talk about the potential schedule and the prep time, we've also talked creatively. Like we also echo the idea of an activity bus. We echo the idea of doing that schedule within the day smarter and looking at, we resurfaced conversations that talk about how Hillcrest used to schedule some of those longer blocks. But we can't even really get to that creative place right now because we're drowning as teachers. And so, Jen, I know we've got other challenges, but hybrid for us gives options to our families and students at the high school and at the junior high that we think is important.
Well, I think if you don't have the hybrid option, I mean, I've exercised the hybrid option with the sick child this week, we exercised the option with the sick child this week who, had I not had that option, might have sent him, you know, and hopefully all of them are doing that.
Okay, I was gonna say, one of the things we did consider was just doing our early out Wednesday schedule across the board. But the problem with that is it only gives 20 more minutes of prep time a day for our junior highs. So we looked at, you know, our early out schedule is our elementaries get out at 1 o'clock and 1:15, and our junior highs get out at 1:50. On a normal day, they get out at 2:10. So that gives 20 more minutes to our junior highs, but we don't feel like that's probably enough given the fact that they're doing all three modalities. But did you have a comment, Belinda? Scott, does anybody else want to say anything on this one?
If we're gonna go to the trust, it goes to the trust and reverse. Do I know that at the high school, this is more cool, do I know that that time is being used well? Because we are still hearing that it's not I use the hybrid as an option, it was I was told to use hybrid as an option. And so I was told, like.
You're still hearing that?
Yeah, don't send them.
Okay.
And then your parents just go, oh, we fixed it in class, which is awesome for COVID, not awesome for face-to-face instruction. So there is a little trust, I think, that's coming at me like, if I give you this, and it's really, junior high is the short end of the stick on this stuff. I mean, you know, and then elementary, you never have enough time for that, like, ever. So,
Did any of you have Carter Jennings last year? Because he was already doing this as a teacher teacher, and he's a chemistry and he's a chemistry teacher. And one of the things that this department has talked about is that, that the conversation centered on saying what's most important to do in person becomes the relevant conversation. And so when Missy was talking about the direct instruction that is uploaded, that they preload and the homework, he always was all about labs. Like when we came into his class, he had this routine that kids knew, he did the pre-reading, which got to do the fun stuff when you were with him. And, you know, putting things in, melting things, and setting things on fire. So again, I think that trust, when I hear the stories, I hope that they're individuals and few individuals and not.
We're taking a lot of time off of instruction of our students. We're asking a lot from our teachers. We got two sides here. Yes, this is an extraordinary year, but it's my kid's only 7th grade year. It's my kid's only 4th grade year to learn to read. I mean, 4th grade is where the jump happens. It's my kid's only senior year to prepare for college. So we have to look at that perspective as well. Are we giving everything we can to our students? And I think the teachers are. I'm not saying they're not. But it's just a hard year. We have these people being asked to do extraordinary things, but our kids deserve extraordinary things.
And those are the conversations that we continually have.
Yeah, where's the balance?
Where's the balance? And just, Linda, maybe, I know, just so you know, in this model, we don't change any instruction time with the high school. It's junior high and elementary, which I know is not great, but just, we're not giving, the high school teachers are not receiving additional preparation time because they already have, I think, 6 hours and 30 minutes a week, So let's go through a couple of other of these, and some of these kind of build upon each other. The next one is provide that additional prep time at the end of each day, and then return all of the online elementary students to their homeroom teachers at the term of the semester. So that's an option where we could take, and again, there's some positives, which that matches what secondary is doing. Elementary teachers get their students back. In the event that elementary students need to quarantine and be out due to COVID, they stay with their regular teacher. But there are also some challenges. Our online teachers who we have committed to pay, they would lose out on either $5,000 if we decided to do this in the semester, or $7,500 if we did it at the term. And keep in mind, the term is 3 weeks away. So, and then the same kind of additional concerns. So that's an idea that we floated. We did the provide additional prep time at the end of each day, return all of the elementary students to their homeroom teachers at the term of the semester, and then dissolve the hybrid at this term or semester. So that's kind of taking, that's a bigger shift. So we're just kind of thinking out loud on all of these. The change with this is we don't have hybrid and all the online students come back. Now, some concerns with that are elementary teachers are taking on more burden. Again, online teachers will lose on that. When we dissolve the hybrid, we're going to have less of an ability to physically distance for students.
Which results in more quarantine, which results in face-to-face instruction.
It could, absolutely could. It absolutely could. There are, whatever we do, we're going to have to, there's challenges and there's benefits.
Well, another challenge with that is, I don't know, the trust that family has dedicated, actually dedicated to online, and their sons are all in.
Right. They still stay online, they just go back with their school teacher. So it's not that we're not dissolved, we will not dissolve online. Online has got to stay. There is no plan that says get rid of online. This just says move those online rather than those.
I guess I think what they thought it was like is about something. For elementary.
I don't know if they
had
were
a
gonna
dedicated teacher that was.
Well, they have a dedicated teacher, but that teacher's in almost all but 2 cases, or 3 is teaching during the day. Does that make sense? So it's not, we have 3 that we reallocated FT, and then that would bring out what do we do with those 3 teachers. So we have to look at that. Does that make sense? Is that, or am I still not answering your question, Belinda?
I think all of my neighbors that have online, they love it, their kids love it, but I haven't heard much about hybrid that they like.
So, yeah,
Hybrid definitely has the most challenges.
yeah,
But it's something that's new, never been done, so it
Right.
has the most challenges.
I think Rob mentioned that, but our teachers still aren't, like, they haven't hit their stride on hybrid yet. Right, but, well, and part of the reason.
part of the reason that it's working, hybrid and online is working, or hybrid is working better in the secondary than it is in the elementary, is because the secondary is doing the online piece too. So there's not a difference between a hybrid kid and an online kid in the secondary. So if you have a hybrid kid, they're just doing the same work is online, rather than having a dedicated teacher. And that was in an effort to save elementary teachers who have no prep and having to load up 8 content areas into their system. We said, let's pay a stipend to what we thought was gonna be 7 teachers turned into 24, because we had no idea we'd have that many numbers. And so we thought, on paper, we thought it was gonna be a really good idea, but that's why hybrid isn't working, because now all teachers are uploading their hybrid stuff, which is a version of their classroom, and then online is a totally different version of a different classroom. And so parents are getting confused as to why there's like 3 different iterations of student learning. It would really solve everything to say, elementary teacher, you're responsible for hybrid and online, but that would have a whole different set of consequences of teacher burnout. But that was why hybrid isn't working in the elementary. Because they're not doing all 3 modalities, and there was a reason we didn't do all 3 modalities. It was very intentional.
If we think about this from a health perspective too, our younger kids are not getting sick as much, so eliminating that hybrid and forcing one way or the other might solve that problem. At the high school, having that hybrid option so that you can come, except for when you're sick, then you don't come. It might make sense, and I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud.
This is why we need to talk. So if we dissolve the hybrid at either the term or the semester, that would take care of the elementary concerns and the concerns of hybrid students not coming prepared. And I mean, we could potentially look at splitting it between elementary and secondary and saying we're only going to do hybrid in secondary and not elementary. But one of the things we want to consider is we do have, at least from the data that we receive, 53% of our families are doing everything they've been asked in the hybrid model. So do we take it away? And Scott brought this up when we talked. Do we take it away from 53% who are doing it? And if we dissolved hybrid, we probably would have to give online back to the teachers, because there would probably be a lot of hybrid kids who would say, I don't want to send my children, I want to go to online, and we don't have any room in our online right now. And I don't know that we can find, we've been trying to figure this out already. I don't think we would have to give them back to their teachers. That would probably be the only way we could sustain it. Does that make sense? I think Robin had a comment.
You know what, I'm over here working on my own hybrid schedule for dismissals. You know, and I think, I don't know, maybe what we do is look at, I mean, getting after the junior high and the needs that they've articulated for us. If we looked at the earlier out for the junior high, like at a 140, which gives the 40 or 50 minutes that Dave Roberts needs for buses. And maybe you look at occasional Fridays or even consistent Fridays for your elementary. If the concern is about the loss of instruction for the elementary.
I would consider an AD schedule if we got your hybrid. I think an AD schedule for daycare for child living is so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, is that, I think I've heard me beat that drum 1,000 times. I know we're not the babysitters, but people count on their kids to be in school when they count on their kids to be in school. So every time we throw this up, which we haven't yet, we have to, and I think you're concerned, we have to know, we put family, you guys are all working parents, we've all been there. It's a, what do I do where my mom, who's going to be where all the work?
So there's another one that just says return all online elementary students to homeroom teachers at the term, and that's kind of already been addressed. The other one that our neighboring districts have done, but again, is to do a Monday through Thursday, full day. We wouldn't give them, I mean, right now we've taken 30 minutes off. We need to go with a full day, like we did last year, and then have Friday as an online day for students. So that would give teachers prep time weekly. It doesn't address the daily prep time of uploading the videos and doing all that they need to do. We could perhaps do some targeted small group interventions on Fridays or virtual conferences. The difference in loss of instruction time is really almost sixes between giving the Friday off and giving time at the end of each day. And then parents would need to find childcare for all day Friday. We have teachers who have students in the Murray district who teachers would be required to be in the building, so they would need to find childcare. So we would be changing the ending time again. So not only would we be changing the day, we'd also be extending the day. And then one of the things that I was thinking of today, this would result in a loss of working hours for our classified employees. Our bus drivers wouldn't, we wouldn't need as many bus drivers as many. We wouldn't need as many food service workers. Pairs we could probably work out throughout the week, but there are classified employees that this would impact, and we do have contract classified employees that would cause that would lose hours. And then just some variations of return all the online students to the homeroom teacher and do Friday as an online day. And just so you know, they're doing it differently in different districts. So some districts are having teachers push out content on Friday. Canyons is the most recent district to move to the Friday, and they are going to call it an independent learning day. So they will not be pushing out any content. They're going to just encourage students to review what they've done throughout the week. Yeah. So one other that we looked at that we talked about in our last board meeting was addressing the preparation time inequities through protecting specials. And we really liked this. We were all excited going, yeah, this would be great. Until we figured out it's a $750,000 financial commitment, of additional money. So yeah, but because if you're gonna have to hire them, they're gonna be full-time employees. That involves benefits, insurance. There's a large cost to that. So we don't feel that's viable at this time, just given the budget. I don't know if Richard's got a checkbook with an extra $750,000, and that would be ongoing. So just a couple, and then that also would involve changing the schedule of the junior high to the 8-period day, which we talked about. So we'll kind of let you digest that, and let me just say, I spent quite a bit of time with MEA on the MEA elementary reps, and we discussed a few of these. And of course, they really like the preparation time, but that, again, I just don't think that's viable right now at that cost. Their second choice was to have time at the end of each day. This is a very small subset, so let me just tell you that. But they said, we'd rather have our kids 5 days and have more prep time at the end of the day, but get to see our kids every single day. We feel like we could be better teachers if we had more. So I'm gonna leave all of that with you, and I'm gonna ask if there's questions or if anybody else here wants to say anything, and then we can talk about kind of next step.
So really quick, you said the first choice is for the elementary is the time at the end of every day.
Right, they really like the prep time, but again, we just don't, and I've already talked to MEA, I've talked to Mark Durfee on that and said it's just not viable right now. So their second choice was to do additional prep time at the end of each day. Their third choice was to do Fridays as an online learning day. Again, that was 7, there were 7 of them there. One from each, there was one elementary that wasn't represented.
Sorry, my husband couldn't get the tickets download. I heard him wanting to.
Hey, Jay, has there been a conversation about getting rid of the 30 the end of the day, would Wednesday be the same as Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday?
We could look at that. The only concern with that would be is Wednesdays are the days where we have PLCs. We have some really good things that are going on those days. I mean, we're amenable to look at anything, but that would be the reason why.
It would offset some of that instruction time if we went.
Yeah, I guess my argument is the instruction line and I get the whole teacher side, totally get it, but I also get the parent side where one of our strongest things has been Marie has, or one of our strongest things has been Marie has protection.
I will say, I think we've got to do something. I think we are at a point now where we have gathered enough data. I really do, I understand, Linda, and you know me, I stood up here and said, we want to stay. We don't want to be the district that's kind of doing multiple things. And we all have said to our teachers and our administrators who have literally come, some of them have come crying, give us time, we're gathering data. Give us time, we're gathering data. And that was our commitment, that once we got data and once we kind of looked at what's happening, and it's not happening just in Murray. We see it, you see it on the news every day. But I do think we need to do something in consideration of our teachers. I don't know that this is sustainable for the long term. And I worry that the health, mental health of our teachers, as it declines because of the demands of their job, I don't know that they're going to be the best for their students. And I would rather give them some more time if we can and have them, say, we're giving you this, we want you to rise to this. That's my feeling.
And based on the last couple of conversations I've had with a few of the teachers that I have close relationships with,
We need to do something, I don't like the idea, if we're gonna do something, then I think I would be with that each project. Like, we need to keep looking at it, like, next time, then we look at it again, and see where the girls in the state of that, and see, like, what underneath those.
Yeah, and I would totally agree. The one thing that, again, that I would say is, I think I don't want to make a lot of changes every single time, but I mean, if they get better, heaven forbid, and we say we can bring students back, I think that's great. But in consideration of our families is what I'm thinking, because if we do a change, then, they're going to need to make some changes. This means they're going to need to find in the elementary if they are working parents in childcare. And so I am not opposed to, but I just am always thinking, like you said, I'm putting my parent hat on and saying, okay, do we want to change again? And I don't have any problem looking semester or term by term. I really don't. Right.
well, they both have two different ones.
Yeah, and then they go along together.
So with elementary, the David most worried about the hybrid kids and so I think that you just don't want hybrid for elementary. It's either at school or online.
I think that would be a big concern to parents, just because it's something that we advertise and we kind of prided ourselves in.
However, we could just say we have collected data.
But we have more than that.
That's what she said, we have 52% are doing okay.
Teachers that answer the survey.
Yeah. So keep in mind that elementary teachers would be getting another hour and 15 minutes if we give them time. If we take away hybrid, again, I don't know that we would need to give more time to the elementary. We could, but again, I also have the concern that we have 53% of those who responded who are participating, and we have kind of touted that. And I also know I like that flexibility, because I worry what you said, Cami. If parents don't have that and a kid gets sick, they might say, well, I don't know. There's a lot of ifs. So
what's these, if you just look at the elementary level, getting rid of hybrid or giving them some prep time? Because it sounds like it's kind of either or, elementary only.
right.
Which one benefits the teachers and kids the most, Cora?
Honestly, I actually think that getting rid of hybrid benefits the students more, even if we give them the option of going to online and then either online or in person. If that increases our online numbers, then we shift online to the teachers and increase their planning time. I think we'll have better connections with our students rather than having a grant student getting online instruction from a Macmillan teacher. Does that make sense? I think that we have a broken triangle. That's my opinion. However, I just have to say one thing. There's chat and it's all the elementary principals on the chat. So I needed to just read this because they texted me and said, read what's on the chat. So Heather Nicholas said, in elementary, we are not reducing instruction time. When instruction time, if we reduce down to the 1:30 release, it would eliminate specials and afternoon recess, which is an hour of their day. It would streamline instruction to math, reading, and science. And so I would, if you guys are out there, and I know there's a delay, maybe you guys can hop on that chat and answer that question that Cammie said, in terms of best benefit for students and families, hybrid or planning.
That was a good clarification. I mean, the families provide a lot of sense that they're in their core. If they're not
But that means that we would shift those specials teachers to interventionists. They wouldn't be getting art, PE, and computers.
They're getting computers.
They're getting computers all the damn time.
But then we're going to see the slide, and our 95% is reading the goal of the, they're reading all of the instruction, are reading early in the math. I think you could figure out some way to do that in junior high, but I knew they were getting earlier or, and I love that fun of junior high and high school, to see the things that you do right in those classes. But I wish we had a way to really make sure they were getting four classes.
Do we have any idea of how many people at the elementary, we're just talking about, are using that hybrid option?
A lot.
I'm sorry, say that one more time, because I'm listening to these,
How many are using the hybrid option at the elementary level?
I can tell you that number. Heather said, shortened day before taking hybrid, planning before taking hybrid. Okay, I'm wrong.
I would echo, I think, and I'm not disagreeing with Missy.
No, I would rather give teachers more time and keep the hybrid. I really think that it gives choice and flexibility to our families. I really think that there are families who are utilizing it. Teachers are having conversations with students who are not utilizing the hybrid and asking them to come back. But for me, because that's kind of one of the things we've hung our hats on, if we can figure out how to give our teachers more time and protect the hybrid, to me, that would be kind of ideal.
The people that want to do hybrid, so they're very glad to have that option.
Well, I think if we take out the educational piece, which we look at the health piece of it, the hybrid is a good option for us to protect the health of our kids. If you're sick, stay home.
Well, and then there is another piece to it, it helps with the mental health, because maybe they're not coming every day, but they are doing some days through social and emotional, seeing their teachers, seeing their peers.
And I think maybe the other piece that we can start messaging out is if we're not using hybrid appropriately, then maybe that's not an option that you get to exercise anymore. The hybrid option was set up as a health concern, not a vacation concern. And I know that we've had some families that have misused that, and I don't want to fly in the face of families and choice, but in this case, if vacations start to trump education and that's not being used appropriately, I think we really need to have some crucial conversations. And so, I know, right? Yeah, taking hybrid away as the only give is not going to change the rapid burnout planning time. So there's 600 plus, and I have 599 in elementary that are exercising the hybrid option, and that is anywhere from 1 to 5 day hybrids. And the reason we have 5 day hybrids is because online was full and they missed the deadline. But as we are dropping kids from online because either for IEP purposes or extenuating circumstances, we are trying to add those 5 day hybrids into online only. So it's.
And some chose the 5 day hybrid because they were gonna see when the numbers dropped, because they didn't want to necessarily commit to the whole semester.
Yeah.
You know, we saw that a lot with our medical needs.
So we have an idea for that too. We would like to, at the term, allow students who want to come off of online back into in-person, do that, and then we can take those spots and put our 5 day hybrids in there. So we would like to give consideration rather at the semester. We're learning a lot, we're evolving. We put it at the semester because we really wanted to, have commitment. But if there's some who want to come off online, we've been really saying, nope, not unless it's a very extenuating circumstance. But we could take those families who want to move back into an in-person model, or even, I'm not opposed to a hybrid. I mean, I think these people are used to that. And then take our 5 day hybrids and plug them in, which would help with our elementary teachers, because the 5 day hybrids are really hard for them.
Online could probably get work. Yeah, and there were some families that said this just isn't what I thought it was gonna be. Some families, their work schedules changed, and so they're like, I'm not gonna be home now, so I can't do this online, because it's like, that's reality. And then we still want to honor social distancing in the classrooms too, so parents, principals have these massive spreadsheets of color coded people and classrooms. It's kind of crazy.
And I also just got a text from saying to remind the board members to speak in the microphone. Apparently they can hear the 3 of us, but not you.
That's probably better.
I will say too, because we're right now in the middle of our parent conferences for secondary, and we have been having conversations, and the administrators especially, in talking with families about what is and isn't working for them. So I know that our Hillcrest administration and teachers, we've had 20 students that we've said it's not working at home, we need you to come back in person, which is kind of funny if you think about it, the consequences to come back to school instead of go home from school. But we also have a lot of families that are starting to build trust, and I am just fine camping with your vacations as long as your students stay caught up. And that's all we're really asking for the covenant between parents is that we want to do school the way that makes you feel safe, the way that makes you feel supported, and we actually, with the next board meeting, will have some data from our student-led conferences. Those have been very insightful about how Canvas and the courses are working for our students. So
Jen, are you good with all? Whether
Oh, yeah, no, we're not doing anything tonight, but here's what I would like to ask. I feel like because we are getting close to the quarter and probably the end of the term, probably the end of the term might at this point be a really natural time, because we're going to need to give our families a couple of weeks to say whatever we choose. So I would like to ask if we could hold a special meeting next week with this being the agenda item. So I'd ask President Anderson for that consideration, and we can do it. We do have on Wednesday is our USBA region fall meetings, but he might, but we could any other night. And so I'll turn it back to you, President Anderson, for that.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are ready to make a decision.
And we didn't want it, we knew there would not be a decision tonight. We wanted to have a conversation, and I will anticipate in the next time we meet, we're going to need to have some more conversations. And in between, there's data you would like us to get, we can do that. For example, I'm pretty sure Robin could go and talk to the junior highs and say, how could we address this 30? I mean, I think there's some creative things we could start thinking about if that's what you'd like us to start looking at.
Yeah, I think a couple of things is maybe some numbers of how many are doing online in every school. Because we saw those at the beginning of the year, but
Say that one more time.
If just maybe a percentage of how many are online,
We have,
if you can email it to us,
I don't want me to just read it live and you jot it down.
I will remember it. Sorry. And then, the numbers that are utilizing hybrid option should be. Right, I mean, that's gonna be a hard thing, but then if we do shorten the secondary, what does the schedule look like? As far as time, any other questions? Yeah.
Which document, this?
Yeah.
You have it, it
I
should be,
can't find it.
you have to log into board book because it's under the executive section. I can send it to you, I'll send it, we'll send it to you, I have a problem. Yep, absolutely, I'll send it to you.
Robin and Missy, just to kind of take some data from different schools to see what's really going on. Because if it's hybrid and I'm only going on hybrid one day and 4 days not, then maybe you say, well, go for 5. You know, instead of having kids.
Well, I think that's kind of a hybrid, right, numbers?
Well, just being, I think, because some families will probably just go hybrid whenever they want, whether they need it or not. And truly, I think our students will have the best education if they are with teachers in a classroom. Because at home, we have people in my neighborhood that, they don't like to do the homework, and the kids don't have to. But in class, the teacher will say, yes, you need to do your work.
Well, and another thing just to ponder, in terms of hybrid and kind of tightening that up a little bit. I mean, Friday is, if you go to any of our schools on Friday, you have anywhere in some classrooms, literally 6, and this is in secondary too, 6 kids in a classroom, 6, 8 kids. Anyway, without exception.
I agree to that.
Yeah.
My kids do not want to go on Fridays. In fact, we had some teachers tell them, do not come on Fridays. That is still happening.
But in general, and I'm talking like parents also exercise hybrid and extended vacation.
Right.
Health concerns on.
As long as they keep up though,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, if they're keeping up, but if they're not, yeah.
Okay, so is there any other questions we have on this issue?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Jared, you want to talk?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to know if we have any way of understanding the 47% that aren't doing anything. What are the actual barriers to them doing it? I'm sure there's a variety of them, but what are they? Are there what things that we can do to decrease those barriers?
Yeah, so a couple, just really quick, I think the 47% doesn't mean they're doing nothing all the time, am I correct, Missy? It means that they might be 1 day behind or 2 days. So 47% have challenges in hybrid. It doesn't mean all 47 are not doing anything. So Missy, we sent out a survey to the teachers, so I don't want that to be a misnomer because it's there is a section that are doing very, very little, but
Yeah, and I would have to think how I would divide that up, but I can send you the narrative. So the question was, of the hybrid students who are coming to class on prepared each week, how many days behind are they coming back to class? And so this is what the answers look like. So for instance, this particular teacher has 6 students in hybrid, and so she says, 1 hybrid student is 1 to 2 days behind. 2 hybrid students come over a week behind and they don't ever catch up. The other 4 are 5-day hybrids. 1 5-day hybrid student tries, but is 3 to 4 days behind. The other 3 have logged in 2 times and maybe 1 or 2 comments on those days, but have done 0 work, but have logged into Lexia and Zern. So like they know exactly what they're missing. And that's the kind of data that I asked them to put in there. Because that tells me a lot of things. Jason, on the other hand, is building a database that we can look up by student to see what they are doing. Whether they are logging in, how they're logging in, number one, are they logging in by Clever, or are they logging in by Google? Are they If they opened up a Google document, what did they do in it? Did they just turn it in? Did they edit it and turn it in? Did they, did they go into ClassKit? What are they? So we absolutely have all of that
So
data.
we know where those gaps are. My question still remains.
What are we doing to remove the barrier?
What's the barrier? I'm sorry to give the
Yep.
parents, saying,
Yeah.
it's too hard, I don't have the time. What are those barriers?
So if they had additional time, I think they could do more of that outreach and say, tell me what's going on, and then have those conversations saying, man, for the health, or for the benefit of your child academically, could we get them back in? I just don't know, and yet I may be way off base. I don't know that our teachers have the time to even be doing that now. Some of them have, but even be doing that outreach. That would be my perception. Parent teachers have been great, because in secondary, they're calling those kiddos who they're having targeted conversations. So my answer to your question, Jaren, would be, I think we know. I think we can have conversations, and some of it we won't overcome. Some of it, quite honestly, is out of our control, but I think the majority, we could talk to parents and say, how can we partner together? Would that be fair?
The big issues of
Access or accessibility are resolved. All of those kids that need wireless access or logging into their Chromebook, that's done. At this point, it would be, do I have the help at home that I need to be successful in a hybrid program or in an online program? And we have, somebody's got it.
Posted for.
Outreach mentors.
Yeah, so we hired to kind of help with that too.
Well, that was one of my questions that we have addressed in one issue here. Jared's brought it up several times. Do we need more resources?
Yeah.
Can we put more resources to solve this problem? But then we look over here at Mr. Reese, and he's starts to sweat, because it does come at a financial cost. And we saw the number with just adding specials.
So I can give you an example from the online world. And again, I know this is very specific to elementary, but because it's a very different model than it is in secondary. So in elementary, my online teachers every week are sending me the names of the kids that they haven't seen work from. And so then me and Melissa are doing that back end work of going back and saying, have they logged in? Have they turned anything in? What does that look like? Then we sort that out and prioritize, and we start making calls. Me, Melissa, which is kind of like me, Melissa Shep-Mitchell, and Angie, and we're making those outreach phone calls. At this point, we have contacted them, and we have said, like, is it an internet issue? And we've found a couple of kids that didn't have internet access. Some of them live in West Valley, so we've indicated hotspots, that kind of stuff. Now they don't know how to access certain apps, so we've invited them here, and we are now also going out to the homes, and we've been teaching the families. Sometimes they're logging in inappropriately, and they're turning in assignments the wrong way, and so they're not able to get credit for it. That would seem to be doing all the work and not getting the credit for it and looking like you're not logging in, right? So we're cleaning up all of those issues. That is time intensive. That takes 2 hours every single day out of my day to be doing that. Melissa, same thing. Angie, same thing, right? That's time that teachers don't have that we can transfer back to them. So from the hybrid world, that's just online. So if they,
Oh, no, lose battery, we're talking to us. If they have the time to be able to do that, then that would be awesome for them, right? And be able to reduce those barriers. And then send the social workers out to be able to identify. So we are hiring youth outreach mentors that can help with that, both in the online world and the hybrid world. Right now, the contact from hybrid has been minimal. Those big access issues have been resolved, but the contact has been minimal because our teachers just haven't had the time to be able to prioritize and identify.
So students are not getting the education they need. So I'm back to who really need hybrid for those students that aren't doing their work.
But there needs to be an option because of the thing, take a sick day or whatnot, or, there's a lot of reasons, and I think it helps. But I would just say, to see, what I was trying to cue you into is, and you started talking about the outreach that's happening with
trying to figure out what's going on with our kids that aren't connecting because they stuck between the online only or those that are hybrid and have several days hybrid and aren't doing anything, it's been incredible. The social workers are going out with the principals and doing home visits or with another teacher. I mean, they're out there, they're going and doing, I mean, so
Pound
they're.
on the pavement.
The outreach is amazing that's been happening to see what's going on and how we can help these families between, if it's a translation issue, or Robin and her ELL people, and Missy and her coaches.
It'd be so meaningful if technology, like, nobody in your home is great with technology, so you can walk through.
Some of our parents are not great at English. So I don't know.
We have a couple of student advocates that do speak Spanish, so we've been, like, we had a family at Dumont that had a Spanish speaking kid, and so we got a student advocate from Macmillan to go with, so there was like a team of 3 that went over, and they spent about an hour and a half at home, and, the mom got even left, and she was like, yeah. But she spent about 45 minutes with the social workers talking about needs, while the teachers were working with the kids on how to submit and stuff like that. It was powerful.
So the other thing I kind of question or wonder about, and I'll kind of paraphrase this with my own experience at work, and that through this COVID situation, we had to drastically change our practice. And in doing that, we kind of just basically figured out how do we get to the basics creatively, but then how do we measure that what we're doing is meaningful? And so my other question would be, are we finding that there are pockets of success in the hybrid? And are those pockets can they be replicated in more district level?
Yeah, actually, yes, but it's gonna take us some time to help our teachers through that. So, the flipped classroom model is something that we're seeing with teachers that's working well as the synchronous, where they are doing the dailies, like they're on live with their students in the classroom, as well as their hybrid students and even online. There's gonna be KSL, is it KUTV? Oh yeah, he switched. KUTV came out and actually did a story on that today. And Missy and I watched a teacher at McMillan who was doing the synchronous learning. She had her camera on. I think the more we can get people comfortable with that and show them how to do that, I think there are some things we can replicate. The problem is right now teachers feel so overwhelmed that they just don't even feel like they have the time to even try those things because they're just surviving. You are absolutely right. And again, Scott and I had this discussion. That, I think, will lead us to better educational models even after we're out of the COVID. I think there are things that we can replicate and do that will be that will benefit our students far beyond this. So yes, there are great things, but again, I think so many teachers are feeling just so overwhelmed with just doing the daily upload and the grading. So yes.
Okay, so it sounds like maybe you will give us some of the information, let's review it, do our own independent study, questions, reach out to Jen or Scott or Lindsay or Robin. And then next Thursday, does that work for everyone? Thursday at 5? We hope, is that Jen, is that?
Yes, that works fine, I think, and again, thank you, I just think waiting for another week beyond that, we're gonna be too far. I really think that my hope would be next Thursday, we can make a decision. That will put us 3 weeks out, but anyway, that will put us just a few weeks out and from the end of the semester, which, term.
So that would be one of the, not have to be.
That's what I was wondering. Do you want to cancel the?
We could, we have we already have stuff for that meeting, so if you want to, we can. I mean, no, we'll just do it. Okay, either way, we can. I'm happy. I would anticipate that when we put this out, we will probably have parent and teacher comments that will come in, as I've seen in other districts as they've discussed this, so, which may take additional time.
Well, I think it's important for us to have some time to
Absolutely
think and gather information about this.
And if you have anything else that comes to mind, let us know, so.
The only thing I have that is just if we could think of creatively adding resources to help make the hybrid model work better for some of them. But it sounds like time is what that will take, so.
Time and the mentors.
Thinking differently, there's ways to unburden our elementary teachers, but it also would require them to relinquish some control and follow a stricter pacing guide, which feels like it takes away their autonomy. But there is ways to do that, but it's gonna take some giving and taking.
All right, well, thank you for that. Darren, Scott, Kelly.
God, you were quiet.
Would you like me to speak for just a second? I mean, no
Okay,
one
Scott,
probably,
we
no
have.
one probably wants this, but thank you. First of all, thank you very much for entertaining these options and for listening. Everyone's working tremendously hard. I almost feel like there should be the closing argument with regard to where we're at this evening. And so if I were to try to summarize and put it into a closing argument, I wouldn't put it in an argument in terms of which one of those 7 or 8 options a board should consider or should entertain. What I think I would say is, as you study those and as you have committed to do your homework with those, I would be mindful of a few things. Number one, there's a tipping point where we tried to guess the amount of time that a teacher might need, and we backed off 30 minutes because we thought they might need that time in extra preparation and extra upload. We didn't even think about the number of emails that would come from hybrid, the number of phone calls that would come, those things that we now recognize are taking a lot of time. And so what we have to do, and everyone knows and understands this, is we have to find that balance. And we've talked about balance in everything that we've considered here. It's a balance between my health and my education. It's a balance between my time in class and my time out of class. It's all of these factors that come together. And I would just ask that we consider, as we look at by increasing, say, for example, preparation time, does that make a more effective teacher? And you've heard from Heather and how we won't lose a ton of instructional time because of ways that we can work around that. And so now it's trying to find that balance to make our teachers the best possible teachers that they can be, given the modalities or the different requests or asks that we've had in this year. Let me go as far as to say this, and this probably is not the greatest thing to say from an educator, but the reality is we're probably going to lose some slide this year. That's just the reality of where we are, is we're going to lose a little slide. Murray District has to be committed to minimizing that slide as much as possible. That's where we've got to be. And so we've got to figure out, where's the time that teachers need that they can get that? Where's the time that students and parents can invest and make that happen? And we can minimize this slide. We're already talking about different, once we change those schedules and reduce instructional time, we're talking about making it harder to stay at the levels we are of teaching. That's a given. So now it becomes, the challenge now to me is, how do we minimize that slide? How do we get creative, like Jaren's saying? How do we look at ways that we partner with families? How do we give teachers the time that they can do those things that make them good teachers and not feel exhausted every day so that I'm not at my best, kind of thing? How do we recommit our families and say, hey, let's partner together and be part of this so that we can be effective and keep that slide to a minimum, because we're going to get back on track eventually. And we're going to take off with this whole thing. We just got to make sure that if we can keep that to a minimal level, we can do some really great things, and kids are going to be well-rounded coming out of the Murray City School District. So I just ask that in closing, at least for my part, that we just consider all of these things. We just look at it. It's a tough decision, right? It's like a jury. You're gonna have to make a tough decision. But the reality is I would ask you to consider those things for the families and for the teachers and for the community at large that have been presented this evening. So thank you.
All right.
The next one is
Yes.
discussion item. Belinda has agreed to lead this discussion
Okay.
and bring me up to speed.
Great.
Is that okay?
Yes.
I have a
Great.
family commitment.
Nope, you're fine.
Started 7 minutes ago.
Okay, so
like we've discussed.
we have.
Belinda will bring me up to speed on the discussion, and so I'll do.
So this discussion item comes out of a conversation that Cammie and I had, where, you know, we've seen it all across the valley, high schools have reached a 15 positive case. And there is recommendations from the health department. And so we thought we needed to have this discussion. We have not reached that yet, thankfully. And again, we are very appreciative to our students and our faculty and everyone who's doing all, and our parents who are doing all they can to help keep our schools as safe as possible. But there may come a time when we reach that, and we will need to make a decision. And rather than having to go into an emergency board meeting and some of those things that we've seen in other districts, and that's fine, we felt it would be good if we as a board had this discussion now, so we knew what, from a district perspective, what direction we would go. So the recommendation from the Utah State Health Department is that if 15 people test positive for COVID-19 across multiple settings, meaning more than one classroom, and are connected by the same time period, it's considered an outbreak. So that means within that 14-day window. The recommendation is from the health department is that no students attend school for 14 days from the date of the last exposure, and that all learning to transition to online. So we've seen this. Granite School District has moved 2 of their schools to completely online because they have met that 15 threshold. The health department does say that this recommendation is set to trigger the local board of education to meet and consult with the local health department on a course of action. The ultimate decision is up to the local board of education. So this is not a requirement. This is a recommendation from the health and science professionals. And then the school should be deep clean prior to students returning. So in our local districts, Granite District their board has made the decision that they are going to hold that if any school reaches that 15 positive case count, they will they will close the school for 2 weeks and have everyone go virtual. And I just put in there a couple of things that they have messaged out. They are not canceling extracurricular activities unless 3 or more players on a team are positive. And that is actually consistent in no matter which district. Canyons District in their board meeting. After school, correct. So Canyons has implemented, and actually Jordan has now done the same, where they are doing a percentage. So they have a tiered system, and I thought, oh yeah, if any traditional high school reaches a 1% positive, so they're taking a 1%. Now keep in mind, 1% for our high school would be 15. So it's a little easier for us because we have a smaller high school. If they reach a 1%, then they talk to the health department and then they kind of decide. If they reach a 2%, which again for us would be 28 or 29, then they will go to the online learning for 14 days. And they actually have 3 schools, I think, that have gone to that. So both Canyons and Jordan, they do have large schools, keep that in mind, have done the percentage. So I didn't update the Jordan one because they just did that this week as well. So the decision and the discussion that our board needs to have is, do we want to go to a percentage, or do we want to stay with what the health department has recommended at the 15? So I'll turn that over to you, Belinda, for a discussion.
So I'd like to know your thoughts. I know it's coming college, so which way you gotta do. I do like that some of the school districts have done a letter at some point in there. It's not like the first name, Steve, I love it. This is pretty stern that he sent out, and 2 days later, it's still closing down, but.
So does 15 student hold true for
Well, and that's something we can decide. I mean, you know, that it does say 15 students or 10% of the population. So 10% of 350 is 35. So, I mean, however we do it, 15 in our world would be the number, because we don't need 10% of any of our schools is larger than 15. So the way that it's written in the manual, the recommendation is 15. Am I doing my math right? Everybody's looking, right? 10% of 3, okay. I'm like, oh my gosh, did I do that right? Okay. I'm like, everybody's looking at me. Did I do that wrong? So 10% of any of our schools would be higher. So 15 is the threshold, because it's either 15 or 10%. So 15 would be our number.
I think we should send a few parents letters with this information, because it's like homecoming night when there were like 60 people in my neighborhood.
And I will tell you, if you saw the social media, Murray High School did send a letter.
And they put, and all their groups.
And all of their groups posted, do not, you know, if you're gonna do this, do it safe. I will say, I want to commend Murray High. I think they're doing a great job. We can't dictate what parents do outside. I mean, unfortunately.
I think that's the best that they can do. Look, I mean, in that particular case, that's the best they can do for school. They can, please, let's all do this together, start the team, and try to do it over. As somebody whose child is probably going to pick up a snowball this year, I was that person. That's what we need to talk to. Because of what is school related and what is not school related, I don't want to touch anything that's parent.
And I'd be happy to give you my opinion if you want it, but it's a board decision.
I would want you to do this.
My opinion is, I think that I am not a health expert, I'm an education expert, and our health experts have recommended that we do it at 15. And I feel like it's important for us to rely on the health experts and what they know and their expertise, and us to do the education part.
And that is what county built.
We haven't even talked about that, so.
I think it's sort of in line, we want to revisit that, we can always revisit that.
Oh, sure.
Down the road, but I think this is probably a little more of a sign of caution, safer.
And I do like the idea of knowing that what's in the place at 15, right? You know, now, County mentioned that the health department and our number are not the same.
So yes, so if you look on the data dashboard, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, and I've talked to the health department, I've talked to the head epidemiologist who's over the dashboard. There's a lag on their end. So anytime a case is reported, I go in and update it. I try to update it within like the hour. So ours is very real time. Theirs can have a delay of up to 2 or 3 days just because the dashboard has to refresh. The other thing is they are reporting all positive cases. We have had a handful of positive cases who are online only students. They have never been in our school. And so that we felt like, and I put that below our table now, we are only counting students who are in our schools, whether they're in or hybrid or in person. But if they have been truly a fully online student the whole time, they have never stepped into our school, that shouldn't count. I mean, that's an unfair metric, because that changes the scope, and so we are not including those.
So I think that the 15-day, 15 one, if we're going on the end number, which is what our nurses and our, not like our, I'm going around, being around number, not.
We have a spreadsheet, Darren knows.
But I know you guys do. I know that you're the one doing contact tracing, you're the one who's calling people, so I know that you know the number. You know the number of minutes of the day. Thankfully, it's 8, not 1,000, not like 8 for the district.
And keep in mind, it's people, so that could be staff and students, and that's how we report it. So our numbers are, we don't designate, some districts are designated between staff and students. I don't want to do that, because I think that gives a little bit too much personally identifiable information. So, but 15 people, so that could be a combination of students and staff.
And another thing I feel strongly about is, that 14 days is we come out. Like, you
Yeah, and it would be the 14, and then we come out. Scott and I did talk about perhaps if we did the 14 days and came out, and then for some reason we had to go into it again, we may want to consider, rather than just the fourth, that would be a board conversation, but we might want to say, maybe we need to now do this to the end of a term. And again, that would be very situational and it would depend. So far, well, we're just into our first 14-day closure, so we'll see, you know, when these schools who are now in all these schools, when they come back, what happens. That'll be interesting data. And that's completely fine. I think one of the things that would be beneficial is if we could message out to our parents, this is what Murray District has decided. So you just need to know if we get to 15 positive cases, you know, we're gonna follow the health department recommendation. I think if we front load that now too, our parents know what to expect. And in the event that we have to pull this trigger and pivot to online learning, they will already know that, you know, here's the reason why. That would be my suggestion. I just would rather be more transparent and say, this is the direction we've decided to go. We're not there yet, thankfully. But in the event that this happens, this is what we'll do.
Let's go 2 weeks. I'm sure I'm not the only parent out there that says, you know, we did this for 2 weeks and now it's been good. So situationally, if we look like we're having an outbreak we can't get on top of, then we do something.
Which is absolutely fair.
So,
I think usually that's the governor stuff to.
yeah.
Is it a big old enough to orient everyone's like, oh,
Yeah. So the other, and I'm really torn on this, the other part of this discussion is if school is shut down, school is all online, what about our activities?
And I will say the extracurricular, it's just extracurricular, so things like your sports, it's basically what it is.
I think there's some other districts that are talking about, Shakespearean clubs and different things that are still needed after school.
So, yeah, so that's a decision on you. No other district, and, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about this, has said we're shutting down extracurriculars as well, unless there have been 3 or more players on that team who are positive. And we,
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I feel like if we're in quarantine, like we're sitting there at home, we don't have to quarantine, except for football. Or except for, you know, and that brings out a lot of people.
Now, one of the things that is not as tricky about this, and this was either really smart thinking or really sneaky. Olympus High soccer team has quarantined themselves the whole season. They're doing online school. So if you shut down school, that would be our master kids. They haven't even been in the building. The entire team. I know the soccer team.
That's what the sports is doing too, right?
Right, make a model, yeah.
But basically, the hope would be that it would only be 1 program or 2 programs, not all programs, but all programs, but drill. So that more would be included, being.
Right,
I think it would probably be the JV, the varsity, because as long as they're not interacting with each other, so, because we have different teams. We have a JV soccer team, we have a varsity soccer team. But again, we can, there's a lot of so if we just say football is football across the board, I don't have a problem with that.
I know that was the beginning of the season because, depending on how big your school or your program is, like when we had a team, they're like, our freshmen have nothing to do with our team players. They never scrimmage together, they never practice together, and then they all got shut down. Our school's smaller. We usually everything overlap more.
But you could conceivably have a sophomore that plays JV football and is good enough to maybe play varsity once in a while.
Oh, all the time.
So they cross over a lot. Yeah.
In our school, crossover.
And conversely, when we had the soccer team that we thought we were going to need to quarantine, according to the data we received, the JV didn't have anything to do with the varsity. So again, I think it's situational, but
I think one of the things to be really clear on is if we let extracurricular continue, it is not about sports, it is extracurricular. It is not,
All of them should have equal.
yeah, it's not football, it's a play, it's just football sport, even though it's football.
so would we want to define extracurricular as Utah High School Activities Association extracurricular, or extracurricular as in fee schedule extracurricular, which there's a lot of extracurriculars.
I don't know if YouTube is saying it may not. So, I put that right up to the, yeah, so if you go with like activity association, even cheer is not included in that. But speak is a little longer list.
Oh, there's a long list of extracurriculars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can pull it up really quick if you want to see what's on the fee schedule.
So we need to decide where we land on this. So what does the guidelines say, like, for high school activities? High school activities will continue for any of them. Well, for high school activities, we will have activities if school is in session. Yeah, it will be okay with like, but they can all, what happens this year is if you have cancel games, there's several canceled this weekend for football, not as many soccer, it's canceled. It's not held against you, it's a no contest and not a forfeit. So they want you to be honest, not play the game. So
I think the question may be, Elizabeth, if I understand it, is what is the threshold? And I think again, it's 3 active cases on a team at any given time is the threshold.
what I'm really asking is are the exceptions, like, when Warren and Provo have to go to Orange, but the governor said, you can still do your sports, just no one can watch you.
Right.
Right, that kind of more of, is it only this, you can just do the sport, or is it?
Oh, you mean on the 14th, if we do, or if they get the 3 and we have to,
Right.
or,
Any extracurricular.
right. No, the only thing, it doesn't say anything about spectators, it just says about, no, it does not say anything about spectators and those kinds of things, or we'll let you play, but you can't have spectators, like the governor did when he moved them into Orange. That's only in the orange phase, in the reopening guidelines. There isn't anything like that if we're in a yellow phase, but we have to close down the school because of COVID. Does that answer?
It's not quite there, but I think I'm not using it outright, so.
No, you're good. I want to make sure we answer that. These are all the extracurriculars that we have as defined by the fee schedule, so.
Is the question when we have to close for 2 weeks, does that mean everything is closed? Like,
That is kind of what I'm asking, but then there's exceptions for sports.
That's really up to the local board, because what it has said is extracurriculars make, and I think they say extracurricular, I would have to pull up the manual, can continue, but will need to be shut down if there are 3 or more, so.
So that includes not only the football team, but the basketball. Yeah.
This is what we've defined in Murray District as an extracurricular.
So I guess I was really cold about it, but I guess this is what I need for is, because I like to, if the rest of the valley is letting sports and extracurricular continue outside of school, then I am okay with them continuing outside of school, is the school shut down. Because I hear I agree. I guess I landed on the side.
Which would take us back to this,
Yeah,
and it would be the 3 days that, that's in the manual. The extracurricular activities can continue unless there were 3 or more players, and I think it does say on a team, but we could say 3 or more participants if we wanted to go with our extracurricular. We could put team / participants.
That's the way I would look at it.
I'm mostly okay with that. I think if there was, a larger issue that the health department was discussing and say that we were students that.
Sure, absolutely. And I will say that in our health department meeting that we have each week, Cammie and I have to meet with the health department each week. This is what they would prefer. This is their recommendation, but again, they do not want to say that it's a mandate or a requirement, but this is the direction they would prefer that schools go. And this is the recommendation they would make. So if we have 15 people and we call, and they will say, our recommendation is you go to virtual learning for 14 days. And then
So what's different across multiple settings? What if it is 15 kids in a gym class?
well, now here's the thing, it's a little trickier at the secondary schools, because if 15 people are in a gym class and have COVID, they've been to 7 other classes. Now, if 15 people in a 3rd grade class, and it's just the 3rd grade, at 3, we're gonna close down a classroom. If 3 in any classroom are positive, then we close down the classroom. So, yes, it includes adults. It is people. 3 bodies, 3 people. It doesn't matter if they're students or the teacher or adults.
So by the nature of the secondary school, that's
Made into one.
That's partly why the high school are being, A, they're bigger, and B, that is needed. Just for clarification.
Yeah, we probably want to put the online students just continue with what they're doing. That's probably a good clarification.
I think that would be good as an online.
Because you're an online parent, so, right, it doesn't change.
We just keep doing what we're doing and hybrid. I'm focusing on online, knowing before it happens. Yeah, I think I'm good with taking the city's recommendations and keeping conversations open with the health department as you're doing third morning, like, once we go to the school district out here. I would think that we need a third morning, but maybe those are like friendly reminders. You're in the middle of a pandemic. I think that's what our school and our district are doing. I read a couple of the letters that went out to different school parents, and it's pretty.
I think our parents and students are doing awesome.
I really think that, and I think the kids are trying to, especially our leaders, our group leaders, our student leaders are really trying to say, guys, we want to have every opportunity. We got to do everything we can to, that would be my perception, so.
In the building, they're doing awesome.
And we wish we could control everything that's going, and as much as we talk, unfortunately, it's not, that is a factor we cannot control, and if that is what happens and it comes into our schools, then we'll have to, that'll trigger us into a virtual if we go 14 days, and that may be a catalyst that is a change for things that go on outside. And I wish we could police that, but unfortunately, we just can't. That is all I have for board. We have for board meeting tonight, and I do not have any need for a closed session this evening. You can see that is a really sad thing for people.
So we are.
Great, thank you.